The blood on Emma Zimmerman's dress had dried to a rust-brown stain by the time she stumbled into Superior, Arizona, and not a single soul in the dusty mining town looked up from their business to ask her what had happened. The September heat of 1882 pressed down like a furnace, turning the air thick and hard to breathe, but Emma barely noticed as she walked down the main street with her head down and her hands trembling. She had walked 7 miles through the desert with nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate hope that somewhere, somehow, someone might care that she was still alive. But as she passed the saloon and the general store and the groups of miners clustered outside the assayer's office, she began to understand that she had been wrong to hope. Women like her, women who had worked in houses where decent folk did not go, women who had run from violent men and survived things they should not have survived, were invisible in towns like this. They were ghosts, even while they lived. Emma's throat burned with thirst, and her feet ached in her worn boots, but she kept walking until she reached the far end of town where a livery stable stood beside a weathered house with peeling paint. A man stood in the stable doorway, tall and lean with dark hair beneath a dusty hat, and when Emma's legs finally gave out and she collapsed onto the dirt road, he was the first person to move. He crossed the distance between them in seconds, his boots kicking up dust, and when he knelt beside her, Emma looked up into eyes the color of a summer storm and thought that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about everything. "Madam, can you hear me?" His voice was rough but gentle, and his hands were careful as he helped her sit up. "What happened to you?" Emma tried to speak, but her mouth was too dry, and all that came out was a croak. The man frowned, then lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing and carried her into the stable's small office. He set her down in a chair and brought her a dipper of water from a bucket in the corner. Emma drank it so fast that water ran down her chin, and when the dipper was empty, the man filled it again. "Slow down now," he said. "You will make yourself sick." When Emma had drunk her fill, she leaned back in the chair and closed her eyes. The room was cooler than the street outside, and for the first time in hours, she felt like she could breathe. When she opened her eyes again, the man was standing a few feet away, watching her with concern written across his weathered face. "Thank you," Emma managed. Her voice was hoarse and broken. "You are the first person who stopped." "What is your name?" he asked. Emma Zimmerman." "I am James Harper." He pulled up another chair and sat down, his elbows resting on his knees. "Where did you come from, Emma?" Emma looked down at her hands, at the dried blood beneath her fingernails. "A mining camp about 7 miles north of here. There was a man, the one who ran the house where I worked. He got drunk last night, and he killed one of the other girls. I tried to stop him, and he came after me with a knife. I fought him off and ran. I walked through the night and all morning to get here." James's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Did he hurt you?" "He cut my arm." Emma pulled back her sleeve to show a long gash that had stopped bleeding, but looked angry and red. "But I got away. The blood on my dress, most of it is not mine. It belongs to Mary, the girl he killed." "We need to get the marshal," James said, starting to rise. "No." Emma's voice was sharp, and James stopped. "The marshal will not care. Mary was a working girl, and so am I. No one is going to investigate the death of a woman like us. They will say she had it coming, or that it was an accident, or that it does not matter. I walked through your whole town, and not one person asked if I needed help. Not one person even looked at me like I was human." James sat back down slowly. His eyes searched Emma's face, and she saw something in them that she had not seen in a long time. Genuine anger on her behalf. "That is not right. That is how things are," Emma said tiredly. "I just need a place to rest for a few hours, maybe earn enough money for a stagecoach ticket to somewhere else, somewhere I can start over." "You can rest here as long as you need to," James said. "And I will take care of that arm. I have some supplies for when the horses get hurt. It is not fancy, but it will keep infection away." Emma wanted to argue, wanted to say that she could not accept his kindness because men were never kind without expecting something in return, but she was too exhausted to fight. She nodded, and James went to a cabinet in the corner and pulled out clean cloths and a bottle of whiskey. He came back and knelt beside her chair, carefully rolling up her sleeve. "This is going to hurt," he warned, and then he poured the whiskey over the wound. Emma gasped and gripped the arms of the chair, but she did not cry out. She had learned long ago how to endure pain in silence. James worked quickly, cleaning the wound and then wrapping it with strips of clean cloth. His hands were steady and sure, and when he was done, he sat back and looked at her with those storm gray eyes. "When did you last eat?" he asked. "Yesterday morning." James stood and went to a shelf where he kept a few supplies. He came back with some bread and dried meat and a jar of peaches. "It is not much, but it will help." Emma took the food with hands that shook, and she ate slowly, trying not to seem desperate even though she was starving. James sat in the other chair and watched her, not in the way men usually watched her, but like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. "You do not have to leave town," he said after a while. "You could stay here in Superior. Start fresh." Emma shook her head. "Everyone in these mining towns knows what I am. The decent women will not speak to me, and the men will think I am still for sale. There is no fresh start for someone like me in a place like this." "What if I told people you were my cousin from back east?" James said. "What if I gave you a job helping me run the stable? You would have a legitimate occupation, a place to live, and no one would question it if I vouched for you." Emma stared at him. "Why would you do that? You do not even know me." "Because what happened to you is not right," James said simply. "Because you deserve better than to be invisible. Because when I saw you fall in that street and everyone else just walked by, it made me so angry I could hardly see straight. I have been alone for a long time, Emma. My parents died 5 years ago, and I have been running this stable by myself ever since. I could use the help, and you need a place to be safe. Seems like we could help each other." Emma wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that someone could look at her and see a person worth helping, not just a ruined woman who deserved whatever bad things happened to her. But trust was a luxury she had not been able to afford in years. "I do not want your pity," she said carefully. "Good, because I am not offering pity," James replied. "I am offering a job and a chance. What you do with it is up to you." Emma looked around the small office, then out the door at the stable yard beyond. It was a humble place, but it was honest work, and James Harper seemed like an honest man. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. "All right," she said quietly. "I will try. But if people figure out what I am and make trouble for you, I will leave. I will not let you suffer because you tried to help me." James held out his hand, and after a moment, Emma shook it. His grip was warm and firm, and for the first time since she had fled the mining camp, Emma felt something that might have been hope. Over the next few weeks, Emma settled into a routine at Harper's livery. She cleaned the stalls, fed and watered the horses, and helped James with the shoeing and grooming. The work was hard and her body ached at the end of each day, but it was honest labor, and that made all the difference. James had been true to his word. He told people in town that Emma was his cousin from Philadelphia, come west after her parents died to make a new life. Most people seemed to accept the story without question, though Emma noticed that some of the women in town gave her suspicious looks when she went to the general store. James set Emma up in a small room at the back of his house. It had been a storage room before, but he cleaned it out and brought in a bed and a dresser and even a small mirror. It was the nicest place Emma had lived in years, and sometimes she lay awake at night just looking at the clean white walls and the curtains James had hung over the window, hardly believing that this was her life now. James himself was a puzzle that Emma could not quite figure out. He was kind without being soft, strong without being cruel, and he treated her with a respect that Emma had forgotten existed. He never asked about her past beyond what she had told him that first day. never looked at her with hunger or expectation, never made her feel like his kindness came with a price. He just worked beside her every day, teaching her about horses and tack and the 100 small skills that went into running a stable. And in the evenings, they would sit on his porch and watch the sun set over the mountains while James told her stories about growing up in Arizona territory. Emma found herself watching James when he worked, noticing the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt when he lifted a saddle, the way he spoke gently to nervous horses, the way he smiled when he talked about his parents. She had been with many men in her life, but she had never actually known a man before, not the way she was getting to know James. It was strange and frightening and wonderful all at once. One evening, about a month after Emma had arrived in Superior, she was sweeping out the stable when she heard voices from the street. She looked up and saw three women approaching, all dressed in their Sunday best even though it was Thursday. Emma recognized them from church, which she and James attended each week as part of maintaining her cover as his respectable cousin. The women were led by Martha Crawford, the wife of the mine superintendent, a woman with a sharp face and sharper eyes. "Miss Zimmerman," Martha said as she swept into the stable, "we would like a word with you." Emma set down her broom and wiped her hands on her apron. "Of course, Mrs. Crawford. What can I do for you?" Martha looked around the stable with barely concealed disdain. "We have been hearing some disturbing rumors about you, Miss Zimmerman. Rumors that perhaps you are not really Mr. Harper's cousin. Rumors that perhaps you came from one of the less respectable establishments up in the mining camps." Emma's heart began to pound, but she kept her face calm. "I do not know where you heard such things, but they are not true. James is my cousin, and I came here to help him with his business." "That is what you say," one of the other women chimed in. "But Agnes Miller saw you in the general store last week, and she said you had the look of a fallen woman about you." "The look?" Emma repeated, her voice going cold. "And what exactly does a fallen woman look like?" "Mrs. Andrews?" Martha stepped forward. "Do not take that tone with us. We are simply concerned about the moral character of our town. Superior is a respectable place, and we cannot have women of questionable virtue living among us. It sets a bad example for the children." "I have done nothing to harm anyone in this town," Emma said. "I work hard, I keep to myself, and I go to church every Sunday. What more do you want from me?" "We want the truth," Martha said. "Did you or did you not work in a brothel before coming here?" Before Emma could answer, James's voice cut across the stable. "That is enough." All four women turned to see James standing in the doorway, his face dark with anger. He walked over to stand beside Emma, and she felt the warmth of his presence like a shield. "Miss Zimmerman is my cousin, and she is a good woman," James said, his voice hard as iron. "Whatever gossip you have heard is just that gossip. I will not have you coming onto my property and accusing her of things based on nothing but mean-spirited rumors." Martha drew herself up. "Mr. Harper, we are only thinking of what is best for the town." "No, you are thinking of how to make yourselves feel superior by tearing down someone you have decided is beneath you," James said. "Emma has worked harder in the month she has been here than most people in this town work in a year. She is kind and honest and decent, and if you cannot see that, then the problem is with you, not with her." "Well," Martha huffed, "I never expected such rudeness from you, Mr. Harper. Come, ladies, we clearly are not welcome here." The three women swept out of the stable in a rustle of skirts, and Emma sagged against the wall. She felt James's hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I knew this would happen eventually. I will pack my things and be gone in the morning." "You are not going anywhere," James said firmly. "This is your home now, Emma. I do not care what those women think or say." "You belong here." Emma looked up at him, and in his eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. It was more than kindness, more than friendship. It was something deeper and more dangerous, something that both thrilled and terrified her. "James," she whispered, "you do not know everything about me, the things I have done, the life I lived before I came here. If you knew, you might not want me to stay." James's hand moved from her shoulder to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized she had shed. "I know enough. I know that you survived things that would have broken most people. I know that you are brave and strong and kind. I know that when I wake up in the morning, I look forward to seeing you. I know that when you smile, it feels like the sun coming out. And I know that whatever happened to you before you came here does not change any of that." "I worked in a brothel," Emma said, needing him to hear the words, needing him to understand. "For 3 years, starting when I was 18. I did it because I had no other choice, because my father died and left debts. And the man who owned those debts said he would forgive them if I worked for him. I did things I am not proud of. I was with men I did not know and did not care about, and I cannot take any of that back." "I do not need you to take it back," James said. "You did what you had to do to survive. There is no shame in that." "The world does not see it that way," Emma said. "You saw what just happened. Those women will tell everyone in town what they suspect, and before long, no one will speak to either of us. Your business will suffer. Your reputation will be ruined." "Then let it be ruined," James said. "I would rather be ruined and honest than respectable and a coward." Emma stared at him, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. "Why? Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" James was quiet for a long moment, and Emma saw him gathering his courage. "Because I am falling in love with you," he said finally. "I think I started falling the moment I saw you collapse in that street, and I realized that everyone else was just going to let you lie there. I have been trying to tell myself it is just concern, just friendship, but I cannot lie to myself anymore. I love you, Emma. I love your strength and your courage and the way you talk to the horses when you think no one is listening. I love the way you laugh when something catches you by surprise and the way you always make sure I eat properly. I love you, and I do not care what anyone in this town thinks about it." Emma felt tears streaming down her face now, hot and fast. "I do not know how to be loved," she whispered. "I do not know if I even know what love is." "Then let me teach you," James said. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Emma buried her face in his chest and cried. She cried for Mary and all the other girls who had not survived. She cried for the years she had lost and the innocence that had been stolen from her. She cried for the loneliness and the fear and the belief that she would never be anything more than what men had made her. And she cried with relief because somehow, impossibly, she had found someone who saw her as more. When her tears finally stopped, Emma pulled back and looked up at James. His shirt was wet where she had cried into it, but he did not seem to care. He was looking at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. "I am afraid," Emma admitted. "I am afraid that this is too good to be true. I am afraid that you will realize what a mistake you have made. I am afraid that I will ruin your life." "You could never ruin my life," James said. "You have already made it better than it has been in years. Emma, I am not asking you to marry me right now. I am not asking you to make any promises you are not ready to make. I am just asking you to stay, to give us a chance." Emma thought about the mining camp she had fled, about the blood and the violence, and the way people had looked through her like she was not there. Then she thought about the past month in Superior, about the work and the dignity, and the way James treated her like she mattered. She thought about the future she had dreamed of, a future where she was more than just a body for men to use, where she was a person with value and worth. And she thought about the man standing in front of her, the man who had stopped when no one else would, the man who had given her a chance when she had nothing left. "I will stay," she said. "I want to try." James smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "That is all I am asking." He leaned down slowly, giving Emma time to pull away if she wanted to, but she did not want to. She rose on her toes and met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it was like nothing Emma had ever experienced before. She had been kissed by dozens of men, but none of those kisses had been like this. This kiss was gentle and asking, not taking. It was full of promise and hope and something that felt dangerously like love. When they finally pulled apart, Emma was breathless and shaking, but not with fear, with possibility. The next few months were not easy. Martha Crawford and her friends spread their rumors, and soon most of the respectable women in town refused to acknowledge Emma's existence. Some of the men started making comments when Emma went into town, comments that made it clear they believed the rumors and thought that Emma was still available for the right price. James made it known, in no uncertain terms, that any man who disrespected Emma would answer to him personally, and after he got into a fistfight with a drunk miner who grabbed Emma's arm outside the general store, the comments stopped. But the damage to James's reputation was done. Some of his regular customers started taking their business to the other stable in town, and Emma knew it was her fault. "We're losing money because of me," she said to James one night as they sat on the porch. "You should let me go." "We are not losing that much," James said. "And the customers we are losing are not people I want to do business with anyway. The ones who stayed are the ones worth keeping." "But what if it gets worse?" Emma asked. "What if we cannot make enough to keep the stable running?" "Then we will figure something out," James said. He reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I am not giving up on you, Emma. Not now, not ever." Emma squeezed his hand, grateful beyond words. Over the past months, she had come to depend on James in ways that both frightened and comforted her. He was steady and patient and endlessly kind, and he never pushed her for more than she was ready to give. They had kissed a few more times, always slow and sweet, and James had made it clear that he would wait as long as it took for Emma to be comfortable with more. It was a revelation to Emma that a man could want her and still respect her boundaries. That desire did not have to mean violence or coercion. Winter came to Superior, bringing cold nights and occasional rain that turned the streets to mud. Business at the stable slowed as the weather worsened, and Emma and James spent more time in the house, sitting by the fire and talking for hours. Emma told James about her childhood in Texas, about her mother who had died when she was 12, and her father who had tried his best but could never quite make ends meet. She told him about the debts that had piled up after her father's death, about the man who had bought those debts and then come to collect in the worst possible way. She told him everything, all the ugly truth that she had been carrying alone for so long, and James listened without judgment. He held her when she cried and told her that none of it had been her fault, that she had been a victim and a survivor, not a sinner. In turn, James told Emma about his life. He spoke of growing up in Superior, of his father who had started the stable, and his mother who had kept the books and made sure everything ran smoothly. He told her about the fever that had taken both his parents within a week of each other, leaving him alone at 23 to run a business he had barely been prepared for. He told her about the loneliness of the years since, the way he had poured himself into work to avoid thinking about how empty his life had become. And he told her that meeting Emma had changed everything, had made him remember what it felt like to care about something beyond just surviving day to day. "I was just existing before you came," James said one night as they sat close together on the sofa, Emma's head resting on his shoulder. "Now I feel like I am actually living again." Emma turned her face up to look at him. "I feel the same way. I spent so long thinking I was not worthy of anything good, that I deserved whatever bad things happened to me. But you make me feel like maybe I was wrong, like maybe I do deserve to be happy." "You deserve everything good in this world," James said fiercely. "You deserve to be loved and cherished and protected. You deserve a life full of joy and peace and all the things that were stolen from you." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I love you," she whispered. It was the first time she had said the words, and they felt both terrifying and right. "I did not think I could ever feel this way about anyone, but I love you, James Harper." James's face lit up with such joy that Emma's heart ached. "I love you too," he said, "more than I thought it was possible to love another person." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and Emma felt something inside her shift and settle. She had been running for so long, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the next disaster. But here in James's arms, she felt safe. She felt like she had finally come home. As winter gave way to spring, Emma and James grew closer still. The whispers and rumors in town had died down to a dull background murmur that they both learned to ignore. The stable's business picked up again as the weather improved, and Emma proved to have a real talent for working with horses. She had a gentle touch and an intuitive understanding of what the animals needed, and more than one customer commented that their horse seemed calmer and happier after Emma had worked with it. One warm May evening, James asked Emma to take a walk with him. They headed out of town toward the foothills, where wildflowers were blooming in brilliant splashes of color. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, and the air smelled of sage and desert flowers. They walked hand in hand, not talking, just enjoying each other's presence. Finally, James stopped at a spot that overlooked the town. Superior spread out below them, the buildings small and neat in the gathering dusk, smoke rising from chimneys as families prepared their evening meals. "I want to ask you something," James said. He turned to face Emma, taking both her hands in his. "I know we have only known each other for 8 months, but those 8 months have been the best of my life. You have made me happier than I ever thought I could be. You have made me want to be a better man, to build a better life. Emma Zimmerman, will you marry me?" Emma's breath caught. She had thought about this moment, dreamed about it even, but now that it was here, she felt overwhelmed. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Are you absolutely certain that you want to tie yourself to me? Because once we are married, there is no escaping the scandal. People will always know what I was. They will always judge you for choosing me." "I have never been more certain of anything in my life," James said. "I do not care what people think. I care about you, about us, about the life we can build together. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to grow old with you. I want to have children with you if you want that too. I want everything with you, Emma. All of it." Emma felt tears running down her face again, but this time they were tears of pure joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." James let out a whoop of happiness and swept Emma into his arms, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that made Emma's toes curl, and she kissed him back with all the love and hope and gratitude she felt. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church. Emma had worried that the minister might refuse to perform the ceremony once he heard the rumors about her, but when James explained the situation, the minister surprised them both. "I have heard the gossip," Reverend Thomas said, "but I have also seen how you two are together, and I have seen how Miss Zimmerman has changed since coming to our town. She has worked hard to build a new life, and she deserves the chance to be happy. I would be honored to marry you." The ceremony was small, with only a handful of guests. Most of the town stayed away, but the people who came were the ones who truly mattered. Tom Wilson, who ran the feed store and had always been kind to Emma, stood as James's best man. Sarah Mitchell, one of the few women in town who had befriended Emma despite the rumors, stood with Emma. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, and when James kissed his bride, Emma felt like her heart might burst with happiness. The wedding night was something Emma had been both anticipating and dreading. She had been with so many men, but this was different. This was not a transaction or a service performed. This was love, and Emma had no idea how to navigate it. James seemed to understand her anxiety without her having to say anything. He was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure Emma felt safe and wanted rather than used. He touched her like she was something precious, kissed her like she was worth savoring. And when they finally came together, it was nothing like anything Emma had experienced before. It was vulnerable and intimate and beautiful. And afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Emma cried again. "Did I hurt you?" James asked, immediately concerned. "No," Emma said. "These are happy tears. I just never knew it could be like this. I never knew that being with someone could feel like this." James pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "This is how it is supposed to be. This is what love feels like." Emma fell asleep that night feeling safer and more content than she had ever felt in her life. The first year of their marriage was full of adjustments and discoveries. Emma had to learn how to be a wife, how to share her life and her space with another person in a way she never had before. James had to learn how to be a husband, how to balance his own needs with Emma's, how to support and encourage her without being overbearing. They fought sometimes, usually about small things like how to organize the stable or whether to take on a particular customer, but they always talked through their disagreements and found compromises. Emma learned that fighting with someone you loved did not mean the end of the relationship, that it was possible to be angry at someone and still love them fiercely. Business at the stable continued to improve. Emma's reputation as a talented horsewoman spread, and people started coming from neighboring towns to have her work with their difficult animals. James was proud of her success, never jealous or resentful, always supportive. They worked side by side every day, a true partnership, and their respect for each other grew along with their love. In the fall of their first year of marriage, Emma realized she was pregnant. She was terrified to tell James, afraid of what motherhood would mean, afraid that she would not know how to be a good mother after everything she had been through. But when she finally worked up the courage to tell him, James's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He was overjoyed, tender, endlessly reassuring. He told Emma that she would be a wonderful mother, that their child would be lucky to have her. The pregnancy was not easy. Emma was sick for the first few months, unable to keep much food down, and James fretted over her constantly. But as her belly grew and she felt the baby moving inside her, Emma began to feel a sense of wonder. She was creating new life, starting a new generation that would not be marked by the pain and shame of the past. This child would be born into love and safety, would never know the kind of suffering Emma had endured. In late May of 1884, Emma gave birth to a son. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Emma thought she might not survive it. But James was there the whole time, holding her hand, encouraging her, telling her how strong she was. And when the baby finally came, crying lustily and waving tiny fists, Emma felt a rush of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. They named him Jacob Thomas Harper, after James's father and the minister who had married them. Jacob was a healthy baby with James's dark hair and Emma's blue eyes, and both his parents were utterly besotted with him. Emma threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, learning how to nurse and change and soothe her son. She was not a natural at it, and there were times when she felt overwhelmed and inadequate, but James was always there to support her and remind her that she was doing a wonderful job. As Jacob grew, Emma watched him with a mixture of love and protectiveness. She was determined that her son would grow up knowing he was loved and valued, that he would never feel the kind of desperation and hopelessness that had driven Emma to make the choices she had made. She and James talked often about what values they wanted to instill in Jacob, about how to raise him to be kind and honorable and strong. When Jacob was 2 years old, Emma became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1887, she gave birth to a daughter they named Eleanor Rose, after Emma's mother. Eleanor was a quieter baby than Jacob had been, with a thoughtful expression and a tendency to study everything around her with wide, curious eyes. Jacob was immediately protective of his little sister, and Emma's heart swelled watching her son gently pat the baby's head and tell her stories in his toddler babble. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The stable thrived, the children grew, and Emma and James's love deepened with each passing year. The scandal of Emma's past faded as time went on, replaced by respect for the life she had built and the woman she had become. Even Martha Crawford eventually thawed, though she never quite became a friend. But Emma found that she did not need everyone's approval. She had James, she had her children, she had honest work and a home and a community that, slowly but surely, had come to accept her. One evening, when Jacob was 6 and Eleanor was 4, Emma stood on the porch of their house and watched her children play in the yard. Jacob was teaching Eleanor how to skip stones in a bucket of water, and their laughter rang out clear and bright in the warm air. James came up behind Emma and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I am thinking about how different my life is from what I thought it would be," Emma said. "That day I walked into Superior. I was convinced that I would never be more than what I had been. I thought no one would ever care about me, that I would always be invisible. But you proved me wrong, James. You saw me when no one else did. You cared when no one else would. You gave me a chance to be more than my past." "You did that yourself," James said. "I just gave you the opportunity. You are the one who had the courage to take it, who worked hard to build this life. I am so proud of you, Emma. Every single day I am proud to be your husband." Emma turned in his arms and kissed him, slow and deep. Even after all these years, kissing James still made her heart race. "I love you," she said. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for everything." "I love you too," James said, "and I would stop 1,000 times over, make the same choice every time. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They stood there on the porch, holding each other and watching their children play, and Emma felt a peace she had never thought possible. She had survived so much, lost so much, but she had also found so much more than she had ever dreamed of. She had found love, family, home, and purpose. She had found herself. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Jacob grew into a bright, compassionate boy who loved working with the horses just like his parents. Eleanor was quieter, but no less determined, with a gift for numbers that had her helping James with the stable's books by the time she was 8. In 1891, Emma gave birth to another son, Samuel James, who arrived in the middle of a spring thunderstorm and seemed to bring sunshine wherever he went. Samuel was a happy child, always smiling, always laughing, and his cheerful presence brought even more light into their already bright home. The stable continued to prosper. James and Emma had built a reputation for honest dealing and quality work that extended throughout the territory. They expanded the operation, hiring 2 young men to help with the increased workload, and Emma found herself in the unexpected position of being a respected businesswoman. It still amazed her sometimes, the way people came to her for advice about their horses, the way they valued her opinion. The girl who had once been invisible had become someone people noticed, someone they respected. But it was not just the business success that mattered to Emma. It was the life she and James had built together, the family they had created. It was the way James still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, even after 10 years of marriage and 3 children. It was the way her children ran to her when they were hurt or scared or happy, trusting her to make things better. It was the friends she had made, slowly but surely, women who saw her for who she was now rather than who she had been. It was the place she had carved out for herself in Superior, a place where she belonged. One summer evening in 1893, when Jacob was 9, Eleanor was 6, and Samuel was 2, the whole family took a picnic up to the spot where James had proposed to Emma years before. They spread out blankets and ate fried chicken and cornbread and fresh peaches, and afterward the children ran around chasing lizards and collecting interesting rocks. Emma leaned against James's shoulder and watched them, her heart full. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Do you ever wish you had married someone else, someone without my history?" James looked at her in surprise. "Never, not for one single moment. Emma, you are the love of my life. You are the mother of my children, my partner in everything. Why would I ever regret choosing you? Because it has not always been easy, Emma said. Because people still whisper sometimes. Because our children might face prejudice because of who I was. Our children are strong and smart and kind, just like their mother, James said firmly. If people judge them because of your past, that is those people's failing, not yours, and it has gotten so much better over the years, Emma. Most people in town have nothing but respect for you now. You have earned that respect through hard work and integrity. I just want them to be happy, Emma said, looking at her children. I want them to never know the kind of pain I knew. They will face their own challenges. James said, that is part of life. But they will face those challenges knowing they are loved, knowing they have a home and a family that will always support them. That is what we can give them, Emma. That is what we are giving them every single day. Emma nodded, comforted by his words. She watched Jacob help Eleanor catch a lizard, watched Samuel toddle after his siblings with determination, and she felt grateful beyond measure for this life she had been given. As the years rolled on, Emma and James grew older together. Their hair began to gray, their bodies began to show the wear of hard work and long years, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared experiences and the knowledge that they had built something lasting together. Jacob grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's compassion. When he was 17, he announced that he wanted to go to college to study veterinary medicine. Emma and James were surprised but proud, and they scrimped and saved to send him to a school in California. Eleanor, meanwhile, showed a talent for teaching, and she began helping at the local school when she was just 15. Samuel, the baby of the family, was proving to be a natural horseman with an almost supernatural ability to understand what horses needed. In 1901, when Emma was 41 and James was 43, they celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary. The children threw them a party, inviting half the town, and Emma looked around at the crowded stable yard and marveled at how much had changed. These were her people now, her community. She had gone from being invisible to being beloved, from being a woman no one would miss to being someone who was integral to the fabric of Superior. During the party, old Sarah Mitchell, who had been one of Emma's first friends in town and was now a frail woman in her 70s, pulled Emma aside. I am so glad you came to Superior, Sarah said, holding Emma's hands in her own gnarled ones. You have been such a blessing to this town, to all of us. You and James both. Thank you, Emma said, tears stinging her eyes. Thank you for being kind to me when so many others were not. You made it easy, Sarah said. You had courage, girl. You had courage to start over, to face down the gossips and the critics, to build a new life from nothing. That is rare, that is special. After Sarah moved away, James came and slipped his arm around Emma's waist. Are you all right? He asked. I am more than all right, Emma said. I am happy, James. Truly, deeply happy. Good, James said, kissing her temple. That is all I have ever wanted for you. The years continued their steady march. Jacob finished his studies and returned to Superior, setting up a veterinary practice that served the whole region. He married a lovely young woman named Rebecca, a teacher from Tucson, and they gave Emma and James their first grandchild, a daughter named Emma, in 1905. Emma wept when Jacob told her they had named the baby after her, overwhelmed by the honor and the love it represented. Eleanor became a teacher at the local school and proved to be beloved by her students. She married a mining engineer named Peter in 1907, and they had twin boys the following year. Samuel took over more and more of the stable's daily operations as James's joints began to ache with arthritis, and he proved to be just as skilled a businessman as his father. In 1910, when Emma was 50, she and James decided to take a trip. They left Samuel in charge of the stable and took the train to San Francisco, something they had talked about doing for years but had never had the time or money for. They spent 2 weeks exploring the city, walking along the waterfront, eating in restaurants, and staying in a real hotel with running water and electric lights. It was a second honeymoon of sorts, and they enjoyed every minute of it. On their last night in the city, they sat in their hotel room, looking out over the lights of San Francisco, and James took Emma's hand. "I have been thinking," he said, "about that day you came to Superior, about how close you came to dying in that desert, how easily I could have just walked past you like everyone else did. It scares me sometimes, thinking about how different my life would be if I had not stopped." "But you did stop," Emma said. "That is what matters. I stopped because I could not stand to see someone suffering and do nothing," James said. "But I had no idea that stopping would lead to this. To you, to our children, to the life we have built. You were a gift, Emma, the best gift I ever received." "You saved my life," Emma said. "Not just that day, but every day since. You gave me a reason to keep going, to believe that I was worth something. You taught me what love really is." They sat there in comfortable silence, hands clasped, looking out at the city lights. Emma thought about the long road that had brought her here, from that desperate girl fleeing a mining camp to this woman of 50 with a husband who adored her, children and grandchildren who loved her, and a place in the world that was all her own. It had not been an easy road, but it had been worth every step. When they returned to Superior, life resumed its familiar pattern. The stable hummed with activity, the grandchildren grew, and Emma and James settled into the comfortable rhythm of a couple who had been together for decades. They still worked side by side every day, though they hired more help to manage the heavier tasks. They still sat on their porch every evening, holding hands and watching the sunset. They still loved each other with a depth and constancy that was the bedrock of both their lives. In 1915, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter she named Mary, after the friend Emma had lost all those years ago in the mining camp. Emma held her new granddaughter and thought about the Mary who had died, whose death had set Emma on the path that led her here. She whispered a silent thank you to that long-ago girl, grateful that her death had not been entirely meaningless. The years of World War I were difficult for Superior, as they were for the rest of the country. The mines worked overtime to produce copper for the war effort, and the town swelled with new workers. Jacob's veterinary practice was busier than ever, and Samuel had to hire additional help at the stable. But through it all, Emma and James remained steady, the foundation upon which their family built their lives. When the war ended in 1918, the whole town celebrated. Emma and James, now in their late 50s, watched the festivities from their porch, too old and tired to join in the dancing and revelry. But they were content, surrounded by their family, secure in the knowledge that they had weathered another storm together. Samuel married in 1919, taking a wife named Catherine who was as horse crazy as he was. They had their first child, a son named James, after his grandfather, in 1920, and Emma thought her heart might burst with joy holding another grandchild. By then, Emma and James had 6 grandchildren, with more surely to come, and their house was always full of the sounds of children laughing and playing. As the 1920s progressed, Emma and James gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the stable, leaving it primarily in Samuel's capable hands. They spent their days puttering around their house and garden, playing with their grandchildren, and enjoying the peaceful quiet of their old age. James's arthritis grew worse, and some days he could barely get out of bed, but Emma was always there to help him, just as he had always been there for her. One evening in 1925, as they sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard, James turned to Emma. "Do you remember what I said to you that first day?" he asked. "I told you that you deserved better than to be invisible." "I remember," Emma said, smiling at the memory. "I was right," James said. "You were never meant to be invisible, Emma. You were meant to be seen, to be loved, to be celebrated. I am so glad I got to be the one to see you." "And I am so glad you did," Emma said. She leaned over and kissed him. a gentle press of lips that still held all the love and passion of their younger years. I love you, James Harper. I have loved you for more than 40 years, and I will love you until my last breath. And I love you, James said. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Emma Zimmerman Harper. They sat there as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here. She had started as a woman no one cared about, a woman people thought would not be missed. But James had proved them all wrong. He had cared. He had missed her before he even knew her. And in caring, in refusing to let her be invisible, he had given her the greatest gift possible, a life worth living. In 1928, they celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary. All three of their children and all 9 of their grandchildren came to the party, along with what seemed like half the town. Emma, now 68, looked around at the crowd and marveled at the abundant life that had grown from that one moment of kindness all those years ago. If James had walked past her that day, none of this would exist. These children would not have been born. These relationships would not have been formed. This love would never have bloomed. James at 70 was frail and moved slowly, but his mind was still sharp and his love for Emma still burned bright. He made a speech at the party, his voice wavering but his words clear. 45 years ago, I married the bravest woman I have ever known, he said. Emma came to Superior with nothing but the clothes on her back and a determination to survive. She built a life, built a family, built a place for herself in this town through sheer will and hard work. She has been my partner, my love, my best friend. She has given me 3 incredible children and more joy than I ever thought possible. I am the luckiest man alive to have spent these 45 years with her, and I hope God grants me many more. Emma cried through the entire speech, and when James sat down, she kissed him in front of everyone, not caring what anyone thought. Let them see, she thought. Let them see how much we love each other. James passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1930, 2 months after his 72nd birthday. Emma woke up beside him and knew immediately that he was gone. She lay there for a long time, holding his hand, feeling the absence of him like a physical pain. He had been her rock, her salvation, her love for nearly half a century. The world without him seemed impossible to navigate. The funeral was one of the largest Superior had ever seen. It seemed like everyone in town came to pay their respects to James Harper, the man who had been a fixture of the community for his entire life. But they also came for Emma to support the woman who had become beloved in her own right. Emma stood at the graveside, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and listened to the minister speak about James's kindness, his integrity, his love for his family. After the funeral, Emma moved in with Samuel and Catherine. She could not bear to stay in the house she had shared with James, where every corner held a memory of him. Samuel converted their back room into a comfortable space for his mother, and Emma settled in, trying to figure out how to live in a world without James. The grief was enormous, overwhelming at times. Emma had survived so much in her life, but losing James felt like it might be the thing that finally broke her. She moved through her days in a fog, going through the motions of living without really feeling alive. Her children and grandchildren tried to comfort her, but nothing could fill the James-shaped hole in her heart. One day, about 6 months after James's death, Emma was sitting in the stable, watching Samuel work with a difficult horse. It was something she had done countless times with James, and the familiarity of it brought a wave of grief so strong it nearly knocked her over. But as she watched Samuel gentle the horse with the same patient techniques James had used, the same techniques Emma herself had perfected, she realized something. James was not truly gone. He lived on in their children, in the way Jacob cared for animals, and Eleanor taught with patience, and Samuel ran the business with integrity. He lived on in their grandchildren, in little James's kindness, and Emma's curiosity, and Mary's laughter. He lived on in the stable he had built, in the town he had served, in the countless lives he had touched. And he lived on in Emma, in every choice she made, every value she held, every moment she chose to be brave instead of afraid. Emma began to heal after that realization. The grief did not go away, but it became something she could carry rather than something that crushed her. She started helping out more at the stable, working with the horses the way she used to. She spent time with her grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and making sure they knew what an extraordinary man he had been. She went to church every Sunday and tended James's grave with flowers every week. Emma lived for another 12 years after James died. They were good years in their own way, full of family and love and the satisfaction of a life well lived. She saw her grandchildren grow up and start families of their own, giving her great-grandchildren to spoil. She saw the stable continue to thrive under Samuel's management. She saw Superior grow and change, becoming more modern, more connected to the wider world. On a warm May morning in 1942, Emma passed away quietly in her sleep at the age of 82. She was buried beside James, their headstones side by side, just as they had been side by side in life. The whole town mourned her passing, this woman who had come to them with nothing and had given them so much. At her funeral, Jacob stood up to speak about his mother. He was an old man himself now, 60 years old, with gray hair and a weathered face. But his voice was strong and clear. "My mother taught me what courage looks like," he said. "She came from nothing, from a past that would have crushed most people, and she built a life of dignity and love. She could have given up so many times. When the town gossiped about her, when people judged her, when things were hard, she could have just walked away. But she did not. She stayed and she fought, and she proved to everyone that she was worth seeing, worth knowing, worth loving. And my father saw that from the very beginning. He saw her when no one else would, and in seeing her, he gave her the chance to become the woman she was meant to be. They saved each other, really. She gave him purpose and love, and he gave her safety and acceptance. Together, they built something beautiful." Jacob paused, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother used to tell me that she was invisible before she came to Superior, that people looked right through her like she did not exist. But she was never invisible to us, her family. She was the sun we all orbited around. She was love and strength and grace. And she will never be invisible to us, not even in death. She will live on in our hearts and our memories forever." There was not a dry eye in the church by the time Jacob finished speaking. Emma Zimmerman Harper was laid to rest beside the man who had loved her, who had seen her when no one else would, who had proved that someone would always care. Their story became legend in Superior, passed down through generations. People told their children about the woman who had come to town with nothing and built an empire of love, about the man who had stopped to help when everyone else walked by, about the love that had transformed two lives and created a legacy that lasted far beyond their years. The stable still stood, run by Samuel's grandchildren, a testament to what James and Emma had built together. And on warm spring evenings, when the sun set over the Arizona mountains in shades of gold and pink, people swore they could still see two figures sitting on the porch of the old Harper house, holding hands and watching the sunset, together for all eternity.